Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Top Agent Commercial Wednesdays. This is a very fun, great discussion. We were talking behind the scenes on, using technology, consulting, winning corporate accounts. But, I'd say winning corporate accounts, unless you're a Fred Schmidt and others that can actually go get the accounts, you do start with consulting. I know we talked about this before, and Fred has always been a mentor, a friend, there, someone I lean on to say, what the heck is going on in this kind of this world? What's the data? Getting the temperature of commercial real estate. And it is important, as I know deal flow right now is a little slow. Everyone's hoping the interest rates come down and that will spur a lot more transaction and velocity. But during the meantime, I know, Fred, you spent your time consulting, giving advice, helping people kind of manage transition, or actually having a strategy nowadays, especially in this market, since don't want to ever say anyone's old, very, very experienced. So, Fred, if you don't mind sharing your background, and we can kind of get into maybe some of the consulting gigs and, leveraging that, I guess, to hopefully win some corporate accounts.
Sure, Jim. Glad to talk to you. And hello, everybody. Just very briefly, I'm 45 years in business. I started in 1980. My first year was um, uh, interest rates were 18%. I know they're high now, but relatively speaking, that was pretty. It was a tough couple of years to start out, but it was a great way to start out, actually. I started as an industrial broker. My first 22 years were with CB Richard Ellis, and after 6 years as an industrial broker, I ran three different offices, run the whole, the brokerage, appraisal, property management, a whole like an aircraft carrier setup. We did that for 6 years. Went to Hartford, Connecticut, and then moved back to New Jersey, where I live now, and ran the New Jersey offices. And frankly, was fairly young and got tired of running 53 salespeople and all. Jim, you know what it's like, and going through all that, and jumped back into the cubes, went back into production, into straight commission sales, became a tenant rep office broker, which very quickly, and we'll talk about that in a second, evolved into what we now call corporate services or occupier services. And if there's any lessons from that, a couple things for all of you as practitioners, and we'll go a little deeper on this, is repeatable income streams and asymmetrical income streams. In other words, income, not just fee-based income, but getting a mindset on charging for your services. And so I was very fortunate to be one of the first people I was one of the first corporate services guys in all of CBRE, by the way. They call it national accounts. They didn't call it corporate services back then. So, and they call it occupier services now. And then I went to a small boutique firm, which was pure play in that corporate services, and then we sold that to Johnson Controls, and Johnson Controls ended up getting acquired by CBRE, so I ended up right back to where I started, and then left that to run, believe it or not, the Sendon company, which was a $20 billion conglomerate, and part of Sendon was Realogy, which owns Century 21, ERA, Coldwell Banker Residential, and I ran the commercial part of that and became the president of Coldwell Banker Commercial. Did that for 10 years. And our footprint at that point was in the secondary and tertiary markets, some primary markets, but mostly in that. And we hit them where they weren't. We're in 175 markets in the United States. And that's where Jim and I met. Jim was through ARIA, right? Asian American Real Estate Association. And we've been good friends ever since. And helping each other out, and been helping Jim on an advisory role and everything. And the last, I'd say, 6 years, from 2018, when I stepped down from my corporate job, really went into consulting, coaching, really on the executive level, succession planning, mergers and acquisitions, just for commercial real estate services firms, and been involved in corporate services. So my consulting background has really kicked in those last 5 or 6 years. I will also say to you, on consulting, COVID brought that to the forefront. We'll talk a little bit about some case studies on most clients didn't know what to do. And so you really couldn't be transactional. You couldn't do a renewal, or it's because they had no idea what their needs were. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But that's all about me. So I'm still active in the business, but I'm more frankly on the consulting side, And Real or Renaissance Global Corporate Services is really helping you guys or the parties to win business. Okay, so that's my background. That's where my focus is helping you as a group to select to secure business and do whatever I can to bring the resources to help on that regard.
And Fred, it's great the evolution, right? From broker to this to that. We all know the industry is always changing. You're always adjusting, moving. Now with technology data, we were even talking about RPR and the data that, let's say, some of the residential, because of NAR that you have, or us in commercial, right? You've seen the changes, the evolving of data and the information of comps and the rise of CoStar, right? We all know. Yeah. And, from there, let's just go on to your consulting. Can you just share, from your brokerage expertise, how you could actually bill for time or bill for services instead of just doing it for free, as thinking the broker mindset of something to sell? Can you how do you get over that mindset or that
Yeah, I
change?
think, and I have a set of slides here, and we can and by the way, we'll be sharing them with you guys, so you can post them. I sent them over to you all, Jim, so you have that. So it kind of gives an outline of that. I
Okay,
think
here we
there's
go.
oh, here we are. Yeah, you go to the next slide. Um, there we go. So what is consulting services? Why should you have it? And then we'll talk about corporate services and in a second. And really, if you go to the next slide on consulting, okay. All right, is one of the things as brokers and agents, and I find I went through this myself too, is that you're afraid, not afraid, but you don't want to ask because you're getting a commission or a fee. You don't want to put a value on your service. And most clients are very used to paying legal fees, accounting fees, professional fees. And so there's times where you're using your intellectual property, your own, what you've developed, and you can package that and sell that. And that can very much help you with regard to that. So for instance, I had a client during COVID, they're putting their property on the market. They were going to do a sublet of 280,000 square feet. And they asked me and I know this client pretty well, the head of real estate. They asked me to put together an analysis of the market and it's, by the way, it's Class A, beautiful building, was a build to suit, and they had a proposal in place and to do an analysis of the market. And by the way, I downloaded everything from CoStar, so it wasn't any magic to this, okay? But to your point about data, Jim, it's like there's all this data out there. It's synthesizing the data and making it digestible, and also making a business case, as we call it in consulting, for the client to be able to use that at a board level approval. So this was a 1 or 2 pager. It was a ton of information, and it kind of showed what was going on in the marketplace and what their decisions were, giving them 2 or 3 decisions. So the way went about that was I put a scope of work. I understood their needs. Okay, put a scope of work together. Say, here's what we're going to do. Here's the due diligence. Here's the information. I have these steps here in these slides, so you guys will see that. I said, then here's the outcomes. Here's the deliverable. All right, and here's what it's going to cost. And there's different schools of thought on this, but my thought has always been you'll always get asked about your hourly rate or whatever, what your per hour rate is. I've always felt that if you do it on an assignment basis, and if it takes me 2 hours or 20 hours, it really doesn't matter. Here's what my fee is. And in phase one, you're going to pay me X, phase two, Y, as I have do different deliveries in the process, and you pay me up front a little bit. And it's very profitable business, I might add. And I think once you get used to delivering this and then getting in the mindset of delivering this kind of service, it can be very lucrative for you. Okay. And very profitable. So it's supporting clients. So from your standpoint, beyond transactions, diversifying income. If there's a book that I used years ago was Alan Weiss's $1 Million Consultant. It's actually pretty good. It's readable. He's a little irreverent. He's also on the web, so you can see them. So there's books out there that can help you in doing that. But it's more in commission-based business, getting into a mindset of that. You go to the next slide there. Any questions? Interrupt me, Jim, if you guys need
Yeah,
anything.
let me ask you that. No, thank you for sharing the book. I definitely want to, and taking notes. When did you kind of make that transition, or how did you just say, you know what, instead of the commissioner giving me a listing or something like that, is like, let's pay, how did you start? A certain dollar amount or just a project completion that they're saying, give me this amount?
Well, there is don't get me wrong, you need to put a value on your time. And so let's talk about straight commission sales, which we've all been in and everything else. You need to come up with, like, if you're making 150,000 a year or 200,000 or 300,000, what's your hourly rate? Okay. And you just take the simple number of hours where I think it's like, what is it, 200, whatever the number of hours is, and you divide it by your earnings, and that's what your hourly rate is. Okay. Plus you put what they call loads are on top of it. That's the benefits and healthcare and all that kind of stuff. And that can be 30 to 35%. And then you say, okay, here's my scope of work. Here's the information that I need to have. Here's this is my estimate of the amount of hours it's going to take me to do this. And you come up with a number, plus you add a profit number on top of that and an administrative fee on top of it. So there's like a McKinsey and all these guys, they fee these things. Their loads, they're called, are very high. So you put loads on top of it. I know I'm talking fast here and I can break it down for you, and you come up with a number and then you can kind of say, here's what you're going to get for that number. Here's the services, here's the phases, here's the elements of the proposal, and then you charge them on a per phase basis, or overall, here's the overall cost, and here's the deliverables as a result. And you can
Fred,
negotiate from
before you get started, I think everyone needs to know what their time is worth. You know what I mean? Because we do waste a lot of time, do other things, don't manage our time well. To know, is it $100? Is it $1,000? Is it 10,000? What is it? And you're right, because it's consulting, they don't have to pay you, on as an employee. They don't have to pay your benefits. They don't have to pay all these other things that it is important. And I do suggest everyone put a number on their time, just even if it's low, whatever, but you need to put and figure it out, like
let
how
me
much you want to make.
let me emphasize that point, and it's a big one because it's bad in our industry because everybody says they'll do this for free. Okay, it ain't for free. In fact, if you're doing it at a no cost basis, all right, then you should put a value on it. Say to the client, you're doing a broker's opinion of value, okay, or you're doing a market survey, whatever it is you're doing. Say, you know what, if you paid for this, it would cost you 4,000, 5,000, $10,000. Like, this is the amount of time that's been put into this. So you put a value on your work, and agents tend to devalue their work. And I got to say, when I got into corporate services, that was really drilled into me. Okay, because I was working with other folks on my team. I ran the team that had other disciplines. I had people that were former attorneys, former architects, and everything, and they come from that world. Like, they charge for everything. Okay, and so it was getting into that mindset. It took me a while to get around it. But hey, if we're going to spec this, we're going to tell the client this is the value of the work we're doing, because if you don't put a value on it, they're not going to put a value on it. So it's even more important, if you're going to spec and do it for free, to show them what their value is and what your value is. So, okay.
Fred, you can
Go to
go
the
ahead.
next slide. So,
Yep.
yeah. Um, yeah, so really what the consulting mindset, your statement of understanding, you're a strategic advisor, you're under their goals. You get in, the one thing about consulting is you get into the client's world more than your world. Okay, so it's getting and so that statement of understanding, which I put in every single document, whether it's a corporate services, a representation assignment, or whatever, what are their needs? And I really kind of lay that out and spend a lot of time on understanding what they're looking for and what their needs are. Sometimes there's undisclosed needs or undiscovered needs, or things based on our knowledge that you provide. Okay. And so the trusted resource, and the last bullet there, which is what you and I just opened up with, Jim, is the outcomes, not hourly billable hours. Okay. Here's the results. Here's what you're going to get. Here's the bed. That's what they're concerned with. They're really not. They pay attorneys. They pay everybody. They pay everybody else. Say, here's what you're going to get for this, and here's my deliverable. That's called deliverable. Okay. So, and then you build your pricing around that, and then they'll pay you in phases or pay you all at once, whatever it is you're looking for. Okay, you can really structure it in a lot of different ways. You go to the next one. Okay.
While you do it, Master has a question, Fred.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, so great question, James. I was thinking about that, but also Fred. I think the pushback, I guess, me being a little devil advocate, what happens when when you're discussing your fees and they go, well, James does it for free. He always do it for free, or such and such, or Chris always do it for free. Like, how do you combat those objections? I think that's what I'm getting at.
You get what you pay for. Okay, number one. Okay, there's no obligation on their part, and that's what I'm saying. Our industry is inherently, a lot of people put it for free. So if you're going to do it for free, if you make it because you think you have a listing opportunity or an opportunity, then you still need to put a value on it. It's even more, that's what I'm saying. It's even more important to do that, Master, if you're going to do it. But I generally think you need to get in the mindset on your intellectual property, your product knowledge, market knowledge, technical knowledge, what you're bringing to the table has a value on it. Okay. And
Okay.
that alone, once you start to think like that and get your minds, I'm working on all of you psychologically here, frankly, is to get your head around, okay, my competition may say it's for free. Okay, you may make a business decision, I'm going to spec my time because they're all saying it's for free. Let's go for it. But here's the value of what you're getting from me. Okay. All right. And I've had this happen with clients where you don't know, like during COVID, this happened. Had a lot of consulting business from COVID because most clients didn't know they couldn't do a transaction. I had a client, it was a mortgage servicing company. They had 1,000 employees in 4 or 5 locations. Everybody's working remote. And this is back before remote work was really in. Now it's in, it's like what we're doing on the call right here, right? We're working in our homes and everything else. That wasn't as prevalent then. So this client I worked with said, look, we're growing like a weed and everything. This is before the interest rates went up. And it's, the mortgage servicing business is like an accordion, it goes up and down. And I said, okay, let me do a scope of work with you. Because they had renewals coming up and we were working on the renewal. I said, you don't need a renewal thing. You need to have a work delivery process on people working from home. We didn't know how long this was going to last. How do you set them up at home? You do space standards for their people. What is the infrastructure that they need to report? And actually, we saved them a ton of money because we said, look, if this continues the way, let's say COVID's over, which it was, and the economy grows, you could set this up where you can reduce your footprint by 50% of the square footage that you need because your people can they were already evolving to that. So we showed them a cost benefit ratio and a savings. So if you talk to a client, going back to your earlier point about free, if you can show them how you can make me more profitable or more productive, okay, and you speak that language, here's the savings that I'm going to have. This is what the study is going to expose you to, or how we're going to help you. They will generally buy off on that and say, when you look at a cost benefit ratio, here's my consulting study, but here's what we think the cost benefit ratio would be. That would make it more compelling. So you're speaking to their business. But yeah, there's no doubt we as an industry undervalue our work and don't put a value. So if there's one thing I leave, two things I'll leave with you: put a value on your work and look for repeatable income streams. Okay, so those are the two things this discussion's about today. All right.
Thank you.
No, my pleasure. Good question, and I'm sure everybody else was thinking that too. So, here's the really the basic outline. Okay, you can go online and look at frameworks and everything. So here's your statement of understanding for the client. So once the client signs off, then you're going to go through phase 2, which is your discovery process. Here's the problems, the opportunities, what we're finding. Then you give feedback, which is really, that is the consulting study, that's phase 3. The client buys off on all that. And then you have the final deliverable, which is the implementation or the execution or the deliverable of the I'm simplifying a lot of steps here, and each one of these can be very detailed or whatever. Okay. So for instance, we did a work on a client for site selection services out of a manufacturer here in the United States. And this is before all the political stuff. And they were onshoring and reshoring and moving out of China, consolidating out of 2 locations in um, California and moving out of, I think they were in Shanghai and coming to the United States. So they're on the West Coast. They didn't want to be in California because of the tax situation. So they ended up, long story short, we went to 12 states, the mountain states, and they ended up in Reno, Nevada. Okay. And we did a site selection consulting service for them with a build to suit that was on the back end of that. And it was very interesting what the primary criteria for that client was labor. It had nothing. The real estate was really pretty easy, and you'll find that a lot of times their criteria, their labor, or nowadays, like with data centers, you're hearing a lot of like the availability of power. Okay, has become the number one criteria. So it evolves over time, but their labor analytics for the key element. We did labor analytics. We subcontracted out, by the way. So that's the other thing. You can get skill sets. You can bring you the conductor at a symphony. You can get different skill sets that you can bring to table that are experts that you can subcontract that out and put their billable inside of yours. Okay. And when we did the labor analytics, this ended up being a 1 million square foot building. Okay. But we were only paid on the consulting was the bill. Now we did get construction management services, so it was some pretty good fees there. But we ended up, they had a location in Reno and one that was 20 miles out of Reno. Now it was $1 a square foot per year cheaper on the building that was 20 miles outside of the Reno area. And so on a real estate standpoint, from we run a discounted cash flow analysis, it's no brainer, right? The real estate, 1 million square feet, you just do the numbers, it's pretty simple. However, when you looked at the labor availability in that marketplace, they would have burned through those people, their churn rate, they would have burned through them in about a year and a half, and they would have been stuck. They would have been bussing people out there if they could get them or whatever. So the labor dictated they're paying a higher fee, but in the long run, it was a savings. So it's fascinating. It's actually intellectually challenging, and you bring a lot of skill sets to the table. But these steps, and then you can bill along. Generally speaking, I charge 25, 30% upfront as part of my fee. So I'm getting paid right up front. And then as I deliver phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, I get paid at different times along the way. Okay. Completion of each phase. And you could have 10 phases. It depends on what it is. So that's kind of a high level view. All righty, Jim, you go to the next one. So here's some areas that you can, on commercial that you can do. I talked about site selection, expansion strategies, lease versus own analysis, portfolio optimization, market feasibility. What are the markets? What's the feasibility? Where Jim and I were just talking about RPR and or you guys analyze the market, you overlay your CoStar reports with demographics and all the different elements and capital planning and financial modeling. That's just a few of them. There's also employee dispersion rates and all sorts of things that whatever your imagination can come up with or whatever the client's needs are. But these are some major buckets that are generally I've been involved in. Now, what I'm doing right now, frankly, is consulting you, meaning the commercial real estate industry and company. So I'm doing a strategic plan for a brokerage firm in the Northeast here on how to grow their business, how to sustain their business, how to get into adjacent revenue streams. Also leadership development and training, and then training their salespeople, how they're going to train their salespeople and train the trainers, if you will. Have a company in Florida that is growing like crazy. And so they're looking at how to manage their growth. How do you put the infrastructure in place? Because as you know, when you're a company, you're not in the real estate business, you end up being in the people business. Okay. And the assets, this business is very unique. The assets are staring, like all of you, the assets are staring you right in the face every day. It's elevator assets. So it's a whole different world in terms of that. So anyway, I've have consulting all around that too, in addition to that. So you go to the next one. So there we go. Identify the area, practice discovery, conversation with peers and with each other, develop case studies and client success stories. Even if you've had transactions, what was the value add? What you should be doing that anyway, having your representative assignments of what you've done and everything else. Build around your thought leadership, and then we're here to help. If you have an opportunity for consulting or whatever, the Renaissance team I mean, between myself, Jeff, and Jim, and the other folks, I mean, my goodness, you have over, just on the corporate services side, well over 80, 90 years of corporate services and consulting. So chances are pretty good we've experienced some shape or some way, shape, or form. By the way, I see that you are going to get a copy of these slides. Okay, Jim and the team has them. I don't know where you guys are posting them, Jim. So, um, but you guys should have access to it. Go to the next slide. So, again, we talked about this: retainers, projects, assessments, value-based pricing, not time-based. Okay, create compelling proposals. Think of return on investment, or like I said, productivity and profitability. Get into the client's language, okay, not your language. Get into the real estate. Get off the real estate jargon and into their world, what it means to them, what their bottom line is, and so maintain your credibility, not dependent on the client, but by what you're delivering. Okay. So that gives you credibility, not dependency. Like, I'm depending, I need this deal, I need this client. This is like you're delivering value. Again, it's a mindset where I'm working on your heads here as much as when Master was asking the question a little bit, it's like, okay, this is the value I'm bringing to the table. Here's how I can help you. This is what I'm going to do. You're bringing something to them. And I think it's important psychologically to get into that mindset versus wanting something from them. You know what I mean? So that's an important way to look at this business, but also in believing in yourself, because they feel that. Okay, if you're needy or want things, people can sense that. Okay, so but if you know, hey, I'm good, and this is why I'm good, and this is why the value I bring, that's a very different look, and clients can feel that. It's an intuitive. Anybody can. I mean, even when you're dating somebody or you're dealing with your kid, all that is not just there; it's in life, right? So it's so you need to approach this part of it with that value add. And trust me, sometimes, unless if they're a developer or somebody, they'll know more than you. But most clients don't know as much as you do about what your area and what you're doing. So that's enough about consulting, I think. So corporate services. I'm not going to go through each slide here, but we'll just run through them. But what is corporate services and occupier services? It really is multi-market representation of clients. And I went into it because way back in my career, I started off as a tenant rep. I was a tenant rep office broker when I went back after 12 years into the cubes. Was doing tenant rep office, I don't know, 12 to 20 deal a year, I guess you do. I was about my rate. And I realized this one client, it was a bank that's here, a regional bank, and CBRE just started corporate services. They just started they acquired an architectural firm that was doing strategic planning. So usually corporate services is strategic planning, needs analysis, transaction management, and then fulfillment. Those three major blocks. Okay, I'm breaking it down. There's a lot involved in each one of those. That's basically the three major steps. Anyway, I had an epiphany. My guy became my boss, showed this flow chart on needs analysis, strategic plan, transaction, and then fulfillment. I said, that was an epiphany. I said, I want to do that with a process. And it was a scalable process that you could repeat over and over and over. And so I said to the group, I said, I want to do this. I'm a tenant rep guy. I want to do multiple. I said, great, go win an account and you're in, right? No risk on their part whatsoever. Went and pitched a local bank here that I did a couple bank branches for. And the head guy said to me, the head of real estate, he said, it's funny. It's funny you came in. We're looking for someone to help us not outsource. It became an outsourced thing to do our work in this region. It was the New York region. They had 195 locations. They were on 5-year leases. So you did 20% of that. It's like 10, 20 deals a year. And they said, we need somebody to do relocations, renewals, expansions, contractions, dispositions, all the different elements of the spectrum there. And I put a proposal together. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, by the way. Okay. I just put a proposal together and went in and he signed the darn thing. The first time in my career and the last time that I haven't signed it. Now, what evolved with that is I won the account, ended up being part of the corporate services group in CBRE. But the other thing was they were acquired. This is when First Union, which is now Wells Fargo, okay, was doing, they were like an amoeba. They were acquiring banks all over the Eastern United States. And that very quickly evolved into the First Union account, which was a huge account. So what I liked about it from a personal standpoint is I could start my year off knowing that I had income streams coming in and I had my costs covered. So it was sustainable revenue every year. I knew I had X amount of renewals, and so I had predictable income streams, and that was worth a lot to me. Okay, having wife and two kids and all that good stuff. The other thing is it requires teaming. So eventually, because I went from 20 deals to 45 deals to 75 deals to about 100 in about 6 months. And I don't care who you are, you get 75 to 100 deals, you're working 7 days. There's not enough hours in the day. So you had to have a team, you had to have people come on board. And also, you have all your eggs in one basket because these contracts, they're generally 1 year and then they have 30-day cancellations with reviews. So, long story short, we formed a team to go after the business, to win the business, and then fulfill the business. So those are the 3 steps. So I like the asymmetric, the risk profile of it, repeatable. Yeah, go to the next one there, Jim. That's fine. Okay. What we deliver: training, account development, field delivery, building a delivery, evolve our story, telling our story, and succeeding. So that's kind of the different elements of it. For you, what I would say to you is any size client this can be done with. In fact, I would encourage you, if you have clients with 5 locations, 10 locations, 15 locations, get 2 or 3 of those and you're off to the races. Okay, think about every single year they're turning over their leases, and leases are getting shorter and shorter. And you can say, look, I'll be your real estate department. I'll handle this, your portfolio for you, and we'll do assessments of the markets and where you are, where you're expanding and growing. And it can be in any industry. It can be a retailer, it can be office, it can be industrial. And it doesn't need to be a major account, but again, it's like looking up, if you will. In other words, it's called ask the question. In other words, what makes you successful, you're focused on your deal, you're focused on your market, and focused on that. But when you take one step back and look at the client and say, okay, this is this one deal. When you're talking to the client, well, how are you guys growing? Well, we're growing like a weed. We're these other markets and we're just expanding like crazy, or we have 20 locations and I'm having a hard time. So just ask that question, say, I think I can help you and become your trusted advisor, your real estate arm. Let me do an assessment of it's called a portfolio assessment. We talked about it earlier. Let me do an assessment of what your rollover is per year, where you are in those markets. It's pretty simple and straightforward. You have CoStar now, you can get all the market data. And let me overlay your locations with the markets to see what's happening. So anyway, there's lots of ways to go about doing this, but it doesn't need to be a big, huge account, is what I'm saying. So with that, I'll shut up. And if there's any other questions or whatever.
Fred, I love what you said, to be their real estate department, since many people started shaving, cutting down their departments, right? We saw that, right? That it was just too expensive. They don't need it all the time, is to get outside consultant help to give them, with the CoStar or the analysis of the data, the information. So their board, their acquisition, disposition, the C-suites or the decision makers can make better decisions. So it is important that sometimes when they do downsize, they don't want to pay the 200 plus bonuses and other people for that real estate, and they just kind of hire you to do that. Give you a couple bucks. I mean, it could be pretty good, and you just give them the monthly, quarterly reports you put together so they can present and understand to make good decisions. But I love that, putting a number on your time while everyone's downsizing, especially with AI. Use that well, right? You could really be their real estate department and then leverage it with everyone else, right? As you're the consultant, work with others, and you just split the bill and figure out a math problem. Go ahead, Masters.
Yeah, I just wanted to share. I have done consulting before, like business consulting, political consulting before I got into real estate. And you're right, it is a mindset, and people will pay for your knowledge, especially if they don't know how to do it. So it's just now reshifting your mindset in real estate now, and just because, like you said, we do have a lot of knowledge, compared to what, sometimes like I was doing with a client recently, attorney recently, and he called me up for a market analysis. The only reason why I did it free because he did me a favor in the beginning of the year. But when it came to land, price and land, and why you should have a survey and public utilities, he really didn't understand why. But I had to explain to him why it would be better, if that land had that when it's time to list it. So I thank you for sharing that about the mindset, because that's exactly what it is. But what we need to, what I need to get better on. I can't say y'all with me. Yeah, that's
And
it.
Jim, you brought up, and it's a great equalizer, and it's something that hopefully all of you are using as AI right now. Okay, I know it's overworked and all that. I have a subscription to I have Copilot through I'm on the Microsoft suite, so I have Copilot, but I also have ChatGPT, and it is just amazing. Write me I just did this the other day. Write a proposal for me for this client. The way you cue it, but you learn how to iterate with it and everything. And it took 30 seconds. It got me 80% of the way there. I had to get it personalized, but what would have been a 2-hour process for me. And by the way, I have a ton of content, so I can use the content that I have, but it's synthesizing it and customizing it around the client. It took a 2-hour process and got it down to 30 seconds. And I just had to tweak it and add it and went out the door. Or you're composing an email or whatever it is you're doing. And, but I would say, and I'm talking to the older folks. When I say older, my generation, but even if you're in your 40s and 50s, like Jim's group and everything else, this change is like the internet change. For those of you who lived through the internet coming, okay, it's this profound a change, and you need to be there. But more importantly, it is breathtaking. How productive it can make you. Now, you need to be careful. You need to know how to query it. You need to make sure you use the right resources, and you double check their sources, or you can direct it to the sources it draws from, or ask it for the sources. But I would encourage all of you to get in the habit of using this. In fact, that'll jumpstart your consulting practice. Say, write me a proposal that shows scope of work. What are the best formats for consulting? Just experiment with it, and it'll give you also, you name it, it gives you the outline. It's just incredible. So,
I hope everyone's using it. I know we bring it up a lot. April, you have a question?
I don't have a question. Sorry, I'm off camera, but thank you, Fred, for the information you shared. This was extremely valuable. I want to thank you personally for giving me a more positive way of handling someone trying to water down the value and the worth that I bring to the table. I pretty much, whenever I have an individual attempting to nickel and dime me, I don't know if they can kind of sense, but through my tone, but it's kind of like you're lost next. So thank you again for giving
but
me a more polished way to say that.
it's my pleasure. I'm glad to do that. And you have are you a lawyer, by the way? I see laying down the law on your thing. So are you an attorney?
No, it's a play on my name. It's laying down the law,
Okay.
son.
Yeah.
You got to say
So
son on the end of it, right?
yeah,
And then I
but
wanted to go ahead.
no. You're bringing up a point, and that's why I'm saying I'm working on all of you, your mindset. Like you're worthy of the business, you bring value to the business, and you're bringing something to the table. Now, usually when a client jumps to price, it means they don't have the knowledge, they don't understand. Their price is the easiest spot to go because they don't understand anything else. So either you didn't do, you need to take a step back and say, did I do a good job of showing the value add, what I'm bringing to the table and why I'm bringing to the table and what they're paying for, or what I'm asking for here. I'm not saying, and now your competition, like Master said, may be doing it for free, quote unquote, but it isn't free. And that's all I'm saying to you is, if you're doing that, then say, okay, here's what I'm giving you. And by the way, there's the psychology of reciprocity, right? If I give you something, the human nature for most people is to want to give something back. Okay. So you create that emotion in someone where they say, oh, I need to reciprocate now. So what are they going to give you back? Now you can't ask for that, but there's that need to want to reciprocate. Okay.
Mhm.
So
The
we're getting
second
into the
thing I wanted to
psychology of selling here a little bit. So, so,
The
you
second
know,
thing I wanted to just chime in on what you mentioned about uh, AI. Just recently, I used beautiful AI to put together a presentation because I was speaking before a team of residential agents. It put it together in, I would say, less than 15 minutes. I went in and tweaked it. I did the presentation last week and picked up 3 strong referrals. And this was from a Keller Williams realty brokerage firm. So it wasn't even within EXP commercial. And there was one other thing I wanted to say. How do we get connected with you? And you did on one of your
my
slides.
contact, you go to the last slide, Jim,
Because you mentioned in that
or
That's
slide
me.
about
Sorry.
putting together a team. So I wanted to get more information on that so I can reach out to you directly.
I think you'll have my contact data is on, well, go to the very last one. There you go. That's me.
Okay.
That's I have about 4 different email addresses, but use that one. And by the way,
Okay.
that's on this deck. Okay. So, and Renaissance Global, you have Jim, myself, Jeff Finn, who I think you've all met. All of us are available, and my focus is on the consulting and corporate services side and everything. I mean, I can do a heck of a lot more, and I do a lot more, but I mean, that's really with this group is helping you. This is about winning business and going after business. So helping you all
And
to
Fred, we
get
hope to
business.
do a course to allow you to really help people, like the consulting, the $1 million consulting, kind of putting that together, because I know having the mindset for your hours, and that's the hardest thing with brokers. And I hate when they say it's free, because it's our time, it's our effort, paying for CoStar, paying for all these softwares and tools, because, oh boy, it's so funny where people keep reaching out to me to do it, and I'll do it like Masters a couple times. But when I feel I'm getting abused because my time and effort and paying for subscriptions are not free, right? Then I was like, okay, enough is enough. And you go find somebody else to go sponge free information, right? Or stuff. But there is value, because when they keep coming, they just don't want to pay for it, but they know there's some value and everything. Masters, do you have another question?
Not so much a question, but a comment. And this was something that happened to me, when I used to have, when I was taking up business law. And I remember the attorney always, and it just always stick with me, now even more that Fred is teaching and sharing this, is that people's gonna pay for your knowledge. That just people will pay for your knowledge. And that's just what I'm hearing from you, Fred, is having that mindset of really showing showing your value, but really like the outcomes of what you sharing. So
Yeah,
so I really
and
thank you for this. I've been thinking about doing this, but you really like kind of like now really put things in more perspective, especially like with the charging and stuff like that. So I
and
really thank you for that.
don't get me wrong, the commission side is very lucrative. Okay, that's why so, and you need to look at that and analyze that and everything. But especially, like I'm going to say this again because it's important. If you're going to do it on spec or for free, I would say on spec better or whatever else, then you certainly should show the value of what you're doing, right? Believe it or not, it's counterintuitive. And the other thing is, as a tenant rep broker and everything, I always used to say, just like clients, the residential side's going through this with all the loose lawsuits going on. This is built into the DNA of a commercial person. You have a right to have somebody represent you. The fees, you're paying the fees through by virtue of your rent, okay, or your purchase price. You're coming to money with consideration. You're coming to the table with consideration that pays the fees. The way financing works on a commercial real estate, um, on commercial, I'm sorry, just got a notice here. Commercial real estate is, if you know anything about financing on renewals and new tenants and everything else, the banks and anybody finance requires commissions to be put in there as part of the debt service. So the tenant or the user or the buyer, or I'm a buyer, I'm generally oriented to that side. They're paying the fee anyway, so they might as well have good representation. Okay, so that's another mindset.
Alejandro, you have a question?
Yes, hi everyone.
Thank you, Fred, also for this valuable information. My question is, here in Mexico, I've done with some clients, I charge for this advisory, and if I'm selling or renting the property, I when I sell it or rent it, um, discount this advisory. Is
So
that
you
right?
charge an advisor, and I can't hear you too well, but you charge an advisory fee, if I heard you correctly, right? Is that right?
Fred, so he's charging, but if he gets a commission or the assignment, he discounts it and maybe
Yes. You
subtracts, right?
credit, you can credit the fee against it. You need to be careful sometimes if it's a big enough deal, or sometimes you can conflict yourself out. In other words, if they're paying you for advice and then you want to do the transaction, sometimes they'll say, well, no, you're conflicted because we want to make sure you're independent of that. So you got to assess that sometimes. Although I find 95% of the time, most clients, you tell them you disclose, define, disclose, document, decide. You just say to the client, look, we made this independent of that. If you want us to work you through the transaction process, we're glad to do that. And I can credit my consulting fees against that or whatever else. Okay. But you need to be
Yeah,
conscious of that they want to know that that's independent judgment and what's going on there. I also can tell you, depending on if it's a corporate client, things, McKinsey, Ernst and Young, you go right down the line, Bain, all these guys, they don't even look at anything unless it's $250,000. Okay. So we're generally in that world of, 10 to 200,000 or 100,000 or whatever else. So, those guys, they just, they kill their clients with regard to that.
Thank you,
yeah,
Alejandro.
that's another. Thank you,
You
thank
have
you.
another question, Alejandro?
Now, I was going to tell that also, as you mentioned, Fred, you can help the client in the transaction process. No, that's another way to charge fees.
Yeah. And Jim, if you want, I can set up a class. I'll charge, we charge for it like we did with the corporate services. But let me know if everybody on this call is interested in the rest of the group. I can set up a consulting class, how to set up a consulting practice, give some templates and tools and resources, and here's how you go about doing this. We can use case studies. The best thing is to take real life opportunities that you all are looking at and kind of setting up a consult. But if you like, I can teach a couple of classes around this. I have the syllabus and everything. I've done it for a couple other companies, so I'm glad to do that if you guys want. So just
Yeah,
let
Fred,
Jim know or send a note.
yeah, we'll set it up again because this is why people reached out to me about their time, they all these things, and maybe from the consulting, the mindset, setting up your practice to the corporate services part as we're scaling Renaissance. And the good thing with Renaissance now, this ecosystem around the world, right, and helping people work virtually and many other things that people could do and working as a group. And in our team, we're building that speakers bureau and billable hours. Of course, you got to have that expertise. We're not just going to post everyone's numbers there for a lot of junk, but we do want to give people other opportunities, value their time, and figure other ways to make money without saying, well, I'm giving it away for free. Because Fred, I'm like with you and many others here. I hate when we say that. It's not free because of the time or effort, the tools we have to pay for. It's not free. Your time is given to them, and you should put a number on it so they know, like you said, they feel reciprocal. Like when I ask my attorney or CPA friends, they give me advice. It's not free. They're just kind of doing it pro bono for me, but they charge, 350, 450 an hour. But for me as a friend, right, they're giving it. But if I really start using their time, we got to charge. April, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually, and that's what, but no, I'll wait for the question. But that's why I jumped to the fees for representing a client. Like, well, you are paying for this anyway. It's just that if you have a listing broker, they're representing both sides. Who's representing you? So you're paying the fee by virtue of your rent or your purchase price or whatever else. So it's a different way of looking at it. But it's like, okay, you might as well have somebody, it's coming out of the fees or whatever, out of the cash flows that you're paying. So you might as well have somebody representing your interest here. It isn't a freebie. And then if the landlord says, And I used to get this too. The landlord says, well, we're discounting the fee. No, they're not. This is in their debt service. You can't discount debt service. So if you know how financing and pro formas works, like there's no way in hell they can discount that. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
April, you have a question?
So I was reading through the chat, looking through the chat. It looks like Eduardo out of Mexico, he has a really good question. He's saying that in Mexico, it's common to come across intelligent customers and they'll listen to the advice that, or an informed opinion, and then they'll take the information and implement it. And there, in many instances, they are successful with the implementation. So his question is, how do you protect yourself from this type of event happening?
So the client,
Thank you,
so
April.
I'm going to reiterate the question just to make sure I understand. Client is saying, I need this information, this data, this market data, the synthesis of the market, the assessment, the analysis. And so number one, saying here's the scope of work, here's what we're going to do for you, right? Number two, here's the amount of time it would take or what we think it would be involved, and here's the pricing that would be on it, right? So it's kind of those multiple steps, and here's the value that you get from it. Now, if it leads to a transaction and you have to make a business decision, like we said before, then you need to say, okay, if you engage me for this downstream work, then I will do this. This is part of what you get with me. This is the value add. Okay. Whatever. I
Awesome.
don't know if
So
I
it
answered this
sounds
question
like,
100%.
yeah, it sounds like he's giving, just based on the question, it sounds like he's giving the answer or the solution to the customers, and then instead of them using him to assist, they're going off and doing, exactly what he said, and then he loses the business. So I
Yeah.
guess
So it's like, and again, that's
consequently
putting
hold back.
so let's take a step. That's that. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's that mindset is like, I am valuable. I am good at what I do. And here's why you should use me. So, in other words, and then if that client doesn't want to do that, then maybe you should move on. Okay. And part of this business is learning what not to work on as much as it is what to work. We all want to, we use hope, and we've all been volunteers in our career. So I've been, myself included. All right. And so we hope this client will do this for us. That's desperation. Okay. And you can't work from that. That's a weakness, right? So you got to work from strength here. I'm not saying you got to be cocky and arrogant and everything else, but it is a belief system here too. Okay.
And that's the thing. You got to value your time and move on, because there are people like Masters, and many of us, we want to, not free, we do some work for them, and they should know that and appreciate it. But when they're constantly coming to you for information, data, analysis, and they go off because they're brother, friends, they try to do it themselves, then you have to just say, look, I gave you a bunch of good information. You used it. Obviously, it was good. You used it, but I'm going to charge you up front for this now. Right? You know what I mean, Fred? If you want to work me, I'm just going to charge it because you're going to use it and use it for yourself, which is fine. I was giving you and doing this work hoping I would get the assignment. But if I don't, that's no problem, right? Pay me for my time and effort and work. But that is a decision where all of us have to come across. And Fred, as we got more senior, right, in doing this, we have all run across this, right? We're hungry for deals. We're willing to give up some time, but eventually you have to manage your time and your team, and you can't just keep doing it. And that's where you have to actually tell people, right, with boundaries, hey, wait a minute, right? Stop using my time the way you're using it. You're not valuing it.
Was very fortunate in my career, in my early going. I hated it at the time, my first 2 years in the business. I had a mentor. So it was called the runner program at CBRE back then. So I think and he was a former IBM person. He would not let me work on anything unless if I had a written, an exclusive or an authorization to represent, like a written commitment from the client. Nothing without a written commitment. And I hated that because, like a lot of you, like you run around, you do all this stuff and everything else, but it really disciplined me to get control of the client. So to Alejandro's point earlier, if you're going to spec the time, let's say you're going to spec the time and do that, then the commitment needs to be with the client to say, okay, I will do all this for you. But that means if I give you this outcome, I want the authorization to represent you, or part of this is going to be an authorization to represent you in this transaction. Okay. And this is part of this deal. And this is what because a lot of clients don't realize, look, you're going to have some idiots and jerks. I'm not going to say the A word, but I mean, you're going to have those. But generally speaking, a lot of clients sometimes, and you'll be shocked at this, don't understand how you make money. Okay. And so sometimes you have to say, look, here's how I make a living. If the only way, if I do this, inspect this time, and there isn't any transaction, there's nothing in this for me. But if there is, this is what I need from you. And you really want to do this to me? Like I've said this a couple of times, you really want to do this to me, like not using me because I've put it, there's no, we don't want to do that to you. So sometimes they just need to understand how you make money. Okay. You'd be shocked at how many clients, not that you're speaking down to them, unless if it's a real estate director, don't understand why we use a cost per square foot per year, cost per square foot for, so they don't even understand why you use a square foot, cost per square foot analysis. You'd be shocked at how many clients don't understand that. So anyway.
Well, Fred, thank you again, to be on Top Agent Nation Commercial Wednesday. I thought this was going to be very relevant as we were talking about consulting gigs. And you do consult some big groups and companies and Asia Pac and some very large companies domestically. So, I definitely want to put something together to teach people that mindset consulting, really create a business.
And if you all on this call send Jim a note or whatever, or myself a note, I'm glad to do courses on this, like to teach, this and work through it. And then nothing better like a real live ammo, right? If you have a client you're going after or something, say, okay, let's kind of scope this out. Let's look through. And I think, like I said, for those of you who are not using AI or ChatGPT or whatever it is you use, Gemini, start using it every day. Just make it part of your world. You need to validate the information, make it accurate and everything else. But it's a game changer that's here, and you're going to need this to go forward. It actually is a great equalizer too, by the way, with companies that have more expertise or larger resources or whatever it is. So it flattens out, just like these pitching business through Zoom, which is something you hadn't seen before. That's a great equalizer because you could put Jim, myself, one of you on a call with a client, and boom, we don't have to get on an airplane or whatever else. So it is a great equalizer.
Like the old days. But Fred, thank you. So, join us for always Top Agent Commercial Wednesdays. We're going to share a lot of these courses. I'll talk to Alejandro, and we're going to start putting courses up because I know learning from this, there's so many people that are on or listening that want more, right, to go deeper. Especially in this time, it's really to build your brand, full services, right, that you can get paid, as Fred said, and hopefully using that to leverage to win really big accounts, and then leveraging each other so you can build a team, and so you don't have to pay it, but everyone can work with each other. So there's a lot of things we're going to build within Renaissance, within Top Agent Nation, and that's the thing, leveraging, building large ecosystems, showing up, and getting the business. So again, Fred, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Glad to help out. You guys have my contact data. Feel free, and hopefully this was helpful.
So everyone, have a great day. See us again next week, Top Agent Commercial Wednesdays, and everyone have a great day, great week.
Thank you
so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. So long.